just recently. We got entitled to a little inside look at some of the content that's going to be in Street Fighter 6. This showcase, for a lot of reasons, was really impressive. The custom characters having their own custom movesets with every single special being fully modular is crazy, as well as the character customization looking fantastic. The amount of customization within the rules of the Fighting Grounds game modes is really just unique and truly something special in the fact that it can help newer players get used to some harsher mechanics, such as blocking on wake up, which a lot of new players have problems with. But what I was impressed most by with the Street Fighter 6 showcase was just how much it's setting the bar for what a fighting game is worth. In the early days of game development in the 80s and 90s, video games were really hard to make. Now that's not to say that video games are easy to make by any means. Video games are still very difficult to produce. But that still doesn't change the fact that things have gotten significantly easier. And because of that, the amount of stuff we get per game has gone up. Small little platformers with a lot of replay value now have so much more to them, such as games like Hollow Knight, where yeah, it's a platformer, but it's also a kind of expansive open world type deal with individual zones, tons of hidden collectibles, and a full fleshed out combat system with separate different upgrade trees that you can go down depending on what your gameplay style is more lenient towards. The amount of content in games has just gone up because, quite simply, making the content is way easier than it used to be, and that's a good thing. This is a net positive. This has had some negative effects, like gamers being especially needy for content, so any game that doesn't release with the most amount of content it could potentially have is considered a failure for the most part. Despite that downside and the other downsides, like the pressure for most games to become live services now, it has been a good thing that the bar for quality content and the amount of quality content has been raising, and that for the high price tag that video games have, they are becoming more and more worth it in the eyes of people. Elden Ring, Tears of the Kingdom, the new Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Games are beginning to really feel like their price tag is worth it. However, fighting games for a pretty long time have felt like an exception to this. Outside of a rare few instances, like Tekken and its weird kind of action-adventure mode where you would go around levels and fight silly goons, fighting games have struggled with the amount of content versus the price tag for a really long time, and for the most part, gamers have been willing to overlook these problems. A functioning multiplayer, offline versus mode against the CPU or a friend, a bare bones but good enough arcade mode, and a training mode was all people really needed because, as far as they were concerned, fighting games are so technical and so deep when it comes to gameplay and the amount of interweaving systems that it's kind of okay for there to be less content if the amount of content that is there can get you through several hundreds of hours. This is an understandable viewpoint to have, and definitely not a wrong one. However, I feel like it is a skewed one. As I said, gamers have evolved and their expectations have been raised with the amount of content in a game. But not just the amount of content, but the quality of it too. I mean, think about it. What's one of the reasons people don't like Fortnite despite how popular it is? Well, it's unbalanced. When people complain about the new Call of Duty game or Battlefield or Apex or whatever, why are they complaining? Because something's broken. It's busted. Back in Black Ops 2, if there was a broken sniper rifle, everyone would be using it, and that would just be the cool thing to do. But nowadays, using that is a mark of shame. Play Need for Speed Unbound and using R34 and anything below S tier, and you're considered a scrub. Just using a powerful car to get by, 4-wheel drive and all that stuff. Gamers want balance, as well as a wealth of content. The bar is being raised higher and higher, and so fighting games will be getting away with less and less. And this is where Street Fighter 6 comes in. With the reveal we saw the other day, it has announced quite a lot. On top of all the content that you would already expect from a fighting game, so arcade mode with character-specific dialogue and small cutscenes that are relatively low effort but good enough to get across an insular story, full multiplayer with a ranking system and a public lobby system, as well as an in-depth training mode. The game also has a full fleshed-out single-player mode. Not just a story mode that is extended cutscenes with fights in between, but a full story mode with a customizable character, as I already mentioned before, with 2, at least, open worlds that you can explore and meet every main character from the game, as well as other smaller zones for the player to explore around, and a ton of collectibles for the player to interact with, as well as smaller fights. Many games to interact with buyable fashion to help upgrade and improve your character, which can then be used in online fights against people also using their customizable character. The game has a wealth of both online and offline content that intertwine with each other. I think I already mentioned that you can set custom parameters for a match, but let's just really explain how cool this is. If you want to learn how to use the parry system, but you're just kind of bad at doing it online and you're having a hard time setting up a training room AI, you can call a friend, get them to come into Fighting Grounds with you, and set up custom parameters for a match where you need to parry to win. That's insane. Health and just trying to learn in a rough outline of what you want to do isn't the only way to do it anymore. Instead, you can really learn through the game forcing you to learn. These custom parameters allow you to learn stuff like command grabs or good oki. There's also multiplayer tourneys and clubs for the players to rally around their own custom made teams or larger teams like Moist and enter into these in-game tournaments, which also make it easier for people to get into the tournament scene in general. Because in a low stakes, completely online tournament set up by the game, yeah, it's easy to just pop in and play that. It's a little harder to get into an offline tournament sitting next to a real opponent. This is a nice introduction. As well as that, the music and audio systems in Street Fighter 6 are looking to be something truly special. There is kind of an obscene amount of music for the game, where just Fighting Grounds alone has at least 5 separate themes from what I could gather. That is nutty. It's something else. And it's here we come to the point of the video. Street Fighter 6 has not just shown that fighting games can continue to be accessible and diverse and deep within their gameplay and just core game mechanics, but that they can also have a wealth of content outside of that, with full character animated cutscenes, with full dialogue, meeting all the characters, with worlds to explore, collectibles to gather, ways to upgrade your characters in a kinda Splatoon-like small buff system that you get from clothes. So kind of RPG light. Street Fighter 6 hasn't just shown off that it can create a high bar for quality content, but that it can also set the bar for the amount of content that should be in a fighting game. The rest of the video game industry has moved forward in time. The easier it is to make games, the more content they can put in their games. Photo modes, extra missions with bonus challenges, more single player content as well as more multiplayer content. A full £50 or $60 price tag means more nowadays than it did back then. But for fighting games, they've been stagnating for a really long time. Street Fighter 6 will hopefully be the start of what can be a sort of revolution for the fighting game industry, where outside of Tekken 8, which was in development for a long time so it kind of has an excuse, every other fighting game needs to be following Street Fighter 6 with the level of content that they provide. If they are only providing an arcade, training, offline matches and online matches, they can't be considered worth a full price tag anymore, because quite frankly, Street Fighter 6 did it better. Street Fighter 6 on launch will offer more bang for your buck than probably any other fighting game ever. Expansive single player modes with lots of customizability, but still the same multiplayer modes that we've all come to know and love, with the same level of diversity and depth within gameplay that you would expect from a fighting game. This is a bar for content that every game needs to follow from now on, and if I'm being honest, again outside of Tekken 8, it needs to be seen as unacceptable if a game can't reach to at least a somewhat equivalent level of content for the price, if not just flat out dropping the price. And you may say, well, the fighting game market is smaller, so they need to be priced higher. And quite simply, no, that's not a good excuse. Not anymore. I understand that Capcom is huge and Street Fighter is a massive IP, but the fighting game community needs to be able to just take a look where the rest of the video game industry has been looking at, take a look at what they've been looking at, and just be able to say, it's not okay. It's not okay that fighting games have been priced so highly for so little content. And Street Fighter 6 will hopefully be the beginning of something truly great for fighting games. So, looking at you, Garou Mark of the Wolves 2, let's either start to meet the barrier of content that Street Fighter 6 offers, or lower the price as a whole. And that's all I have to say. I would genuinely want to know what you feel about these issues. Do you think that I'm being unreasonable and that fighting games should be really highly priced because of the depth of the gameplay? Do you think it's unreasonable that Street Fighter 6 has so much content? Do you think that Tekken should be delayed so they can add extra content? Do you think that its final price tag should be lowered? Do you think that Tekken should be an exception? I would love to know what you think. Thank you very much for listening.